All right, welcome back, everyone. So I'm here today with a guest. I think this is our first guest episode of the new season. So I'm here with Lorriane Anderson, who is a multidisciplinary spiritual teacher, writer, and soul-based entrepreneur, whose work focuses heavily on intentional and energetic living, as well as using spiritual practices as a pathway for profound healing, growth, and transformation. She is the co-creator of the best-selling Seasons of the Witch Oracle deck series, with lots of other titles and things going on. And you have a new book out as well, The Witch's Apothecary.
I do. First of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be having a conversation with you. You're such a great friend in person. So yeah, I have a new book out called The Witch's Apothecary, which was a long journey and kind of a culmination of what I've been doing over the past. Oh, I think I lost you. Did I get that?
No.
Okay. What I've been doing over the okay. It's a culmination of what I've been doing over the past 10 years-ish, but really more so like 15. I kind of started this whole journey into spiritual, magical living, all of that, through aromatherapy and herbalism before I had any spiritual component to it. And that kind of just led me down this path of spirituality. So one could say that everything that I talk about in the book is really the beginning of my path as a witch and as a magical person, and living a magical lifestyle. So I really bring my two grand loves in life together in this book, Apothecary and magic and spirituality. And I focus it on the wheel of the year because I love working with the seasons. I love working with the Sabbaths just because I think they add like an extra little layer of complexity to the seasons. And, you know, they're very representative of the cycles that we have in life. And so I walk you through all of these goodies and recipes that I've created over the years for each one of the Sabbaths in the second part of the book. But in the first part of the book, I kind of walk you through more of my journey of being a magical potions maker and doing things like creating fragrances and creating your own potions and really being able to infuse your energy into a potion, because I can make it for you, you know, and it'll be fine. It'll be beautiful and effective. But I think that if you're in a manifestation journey or spiritual evolution journey, or, you know, whatever spiritual journey you're on, it really is much more powerful if it starts from you and originates from you, and you can infuse your own energy, your own magic. Your intention today, you know, maybe one thing, and tomorrow you have some insight that changes everything, and you want to be able to go and swiftly kind of change your tools and what you're working with. So it's my hope that this book empowers you to do that and to try out your own recipes. And then I give you over 100 recipes that you can take and either make yourself just because you want to make them, or you can use them as a base. So you can take them and say, okay, I want to switch out this. It really does become like a foundational practice for you to make your own blends and potions.
So cool. And it's such a beautiful book. Like, oh my gosh.
That has been the general consensus. I'm really glad because we went back and forth, me, my publisher, and I, you know, trying to get it just right. We really wanted to capture that like cottage core, witchy core sort of vibe and just have really beautiful illustrations. That's something that's really important to me. I really think that, you know, the more beautiful something is, the more encouraged and inspired you are to work with it and use it. And I think it's also inspiring too when you're making potions, because part of the process I think is making it look pretty and, you know, having it be aesthetically pleasing. And when you have a book laid out that way, I feel like it gives you a little nudge in that direction.
Totally. I love that. And you also have, well, you have lots of decks out now and soon, but your most recent one is the Mabon Oracle deck, which you're going to do a reading for us for our upcoming Empowered Modern Witches Summit.
Yes, indeed. So the Seasons of the Witch Mabon Oracle is a part of a series. So just for everyone who's watching, don't worry, there will be 8 decks. I get this question all the time. Is there going to be 8 decks? And the answer is yes. There will be 1 deck for each of the Sabbats. And the most recent one is Mabon Oracle, which is just so beautiful. This is the first time we're working with an incredible artist named Tiana, who typically does children's books. She does a lot of spiritual things, but she does a lot of children's books, and she really brings that like whimsical, folky quality to this deck. And the color palette is just so deliciously consistent and fall. I mean, it really has fall vibes all wrapped into one. She did an amazing job. And I've been working on this practice with my oracle decks where I really focus in on a theme, like a secondary theme, in addition to like the name of the deck. And this theme for Mabon is really about the home witch and the kitchen witch, and kind of celebrating all of those things that bring witchery and spirituality into the everyday, and you know, like the small work, the little magic. Not just so focused on the big ritual, although of course that's an important part of it, but I think spirituality shows up much more in the everyday, the big dramatic weekly or monthly ritual. So that's kind of what we focus in on in this deck, and I just think it's going to be really magical. And I'm doing a reading for the summit, which is fun. I'm really excited about that. It's I think the first collective reading that I've done with this deck, so that's going to be a really fun way to kind of introduce the collective reading into Mabon.
I love it. So exciting. Yeah. So the summit is the week of the autumn equinox. So it was perfect timing to do a reading with that deck. So if anybody wants to catch that reading, make sure you sign up for the summit. We'll have the link in the show notes for this episode. So just a quick plug for Summit before we talk more about your new book. So the Empowered Modern Witches Summit, this is our 4th annual, and we have over 15 different witches and astrologers coming to share live and recorded sessions with us, all about the seasons and the moon and astrology. It's going to be so good. So it's the week of September 18th to 22nd, 2023. And you can sign up. It's totally free to attend. You can get access to the live events for free. You get a few days to catch up on the replays, or you can purchase an all access pass and you'll get lifetime access to the replays, plus a ton of amazing bonuses. Can you tell us a little bit about your bonus that you're offering?
Yes. So first of all, it is blowing my mind that it's been 4 years already since you started this summit. That is incredible. Congratulations. But the bonus that I'm offering is free access to my online membership, Pretty Rituals, which is based largely in part from the content that I offer in the book, where I give you recipes each and every month to where you can be able to make your own ritual potions at home. It kind of changes with the month's theme. I also give a lot of astrology information, tarot information, and most recently in the membership, I've introduced something called Formulations, you spelled Y-O-U, which is a spiritual workbook to help you work through whatever spiritual problems or manifestations that you may have at the moment. So it's set up to where there's one ritual for each month or each week of the month, and you follow each ritual in a progressive order. And then there's prompts and exercises and tarot readings and all of that along the way, to kind of get you from where you are to where you want to be. And you will have free access to that membership for 2 months with my bonus. So yay.
So good. I love that. I love how it ties back to the book and just like everything that you're doing too. So definitely sign up for your ticket for the summit in the show notes, whether you get a free ticket or the all access pass. Okay, we're going to shift gears. Let's shift gears. So I like to start every episode and really dive into our conversation with the same question. So I would love to hear what your answer to this is what does it mean to you to live a magical life?
So I think you caught me at a really interesting time, because I think my definition of what it means to live a magical life is kind of transitioning into a new phase. I think before, I kind of got caught up in just wanting everything to be ritualistic and wanting everything to, to follow the moon and follow the seasons and the Sabbats and all of that. And I still want to do all of that. But I think more and more these days, living a magical life to me means living authentically and really listening to myself, my body, my mind, paying attention to the cycles that I'm in, and not being so rigid. I think for a long time, I was very rigid in having to, show up to the full moon ritual, show up to the new moon ritual, acknowledge the shifting of the signs and all of that. And like I said, I still want to do that, but I want to do it in a really authentic way. And if, you know, if I get to a point where on a full moon, I really feel the need to rest and to relax and kind of just take a moment to be by myself and be with peace, I want to honor that. Same thing with the new moon. Like this past, the new moon yesterday, actually, I didn't really feel the need to set any intentions for this new moon, even though there was a lot of information telling me to do so. I just didn't feel like I had enough clarity to give a realistic intention. And, you know, I think especially with manifestation, a lot of times the reasons why it doesn't work is because we don't really know what we're trying to manifest. We're just kind of throwing things at the new moon or at whatever cosmic portal we're experiencing. And without that layer of clarity and authenticity, it's really hard to be able to manifest anything meaningful. So for me, I think living a magical life right now is just listening and really getting clear about what you need, what you want, and then taking action steps. So I guess even I'll walk it back and kind of clean that up a little bit more and say it's about being present, right? Being present and just starting where you are, knowing that you can get to where you want to go, but you got to start where you are first, and then you can formulate a plan and move forward with that. And then you can use all those cool magical tools to help you get there and acknowledge and, you know, work through all of the little intricacies of doing that, but really just starting where you are. I think that's the most magical thing you can do, is be yourself.
Oh, I love that so much. And there's like so many pieces I want to respond to. So I totally agree. And I actually have been in such a similar place. I mean, I feel like we're in kind of similar spaces in our own practices. We've always had this kind of like parallel like experience of our practices and our businesses, and like, which has been so amazing for all these years. But I've definitely been in a similar place where I'm noticing like feeling a lot less shame and worry if I choose to skip a ritual, you know, or if I choose to not do the, you know, some celebration for the full moon or whatever it might be. Like I'm just so much more okay with it than I think I used to be. And that's something I've definitely been talking about a lot too, is like that consistency doesn't mean doing the same thing all the time or showing up for every single thing. Like it's so much more about just awareness and presence. But I also have been noticing that a lot of the months where I am kind of skipping my new or full moon ritual, or, you know, not doing the traditional thing that I would normally do, I'm noticing where everything is ritual, right? Like this new moon in Leo that we just had. Leo is my 12th house. So I often skip the Leo moon rituals. Like I'm just tired. Like they're just not where I have like all of this, you know, abundant energy and like want to do a bunch of stuff, right? Like that's not really Leo energy for me. So it didn't really even occur to me to do much more than light a candle. And, you know, that was all I was really going to do anyway. But then that night of the new moon, I'm going on this big trip, which I will be back from by the time this episode airs, but I'm going on this big trip and I really needed to start packing. And I wanted my roommates to help me pick out some outfits for this trip. And so the three of us like sat around on my bed, you know, trying on outfits and pulling things out of the closet and drinking wine. And I had some candles lit and the cat was in the mix, you know, and I was like, what actually is a better new moon in Leo ritual than like spending time with your people and playing dress up, basically, like very Leo. But I was realizing like, you know, I think this is such an important piece, that like really living a magical life is about finding the connection, the magic, like the cosmic, you know, reflection in what we're doing anyway, not just in the rituals like we're doing on purpose, you know?
Yeah, and I really love what you did for the new moon, because like you said, it's such a Leo thing to do, right? Leos are all about like the indulgence and the kind of like living this luxurious hanging out sort of lifestyle. I love that already, but I feel like in you just kind of honoring where you were, your soul kind of just guided you to what you needed anyway. You know, like we're so busy trying to like force all of these things to happen, when I feel like our higher selves are in the background saying, now look, girl, I've been trying to tell you what you need. Like this is where you're gonna really grow if you just listen to me for a second. And it's really easy to kind of get the shiny ball syndrome and think, oh, I've got to do a ritual or I've got to do something really dramatic, when I think there is a lot to be had in those quiet moments or those fun moments. And I also think that self-care is, we get stuck too on like self-care in the bath and like self-care in the spiritual sense, but there's also ways to have self-care where you're just hanging out with your friends, or you paying your bills on time, or you're, cleaning your house. I love when I feel like I can't get my mind together to do anything, I start cleaning, and then all of a sudden it's like just the skies open up. So I do think it's those little moments where, like you said, the stuff you were going to do anyway, it can be really a ritualistic experience, and you can get a lot out of it. And also too, I love what you said about consistency. I think that we think of consistency as doing the same thing every day or every so many days, right? But you can be consistent in just showing up for yourself. And maybe today that's lighting a candle, maybe tomorrow that's doing a ritual, and maybe the day after that's sitting and reading a book. But as long as you're showing up for yourself some way, a little bit every day, then I think that you're being consistent enough. Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's such an important distinction. Like, so much of what I teach and what I feel like you teach in a lot of ways too is around, having consistent spiritual practice and working with these different cycles and rhythms, right? But like, it's so easy to pigeonhole ourselves into this space of like, okay, well, that means I need to show up for the new moon and the full moon and for every festival and for every portal and for everything. And it's like, it's not true, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do everything. You can pick and choose what you want to do. But I also think that it's actually so much more intuitive and so much more magical when we are really just listening to, how do I actually want to show up right now? And I also think, like you were saying about the Leo connection there, like when we don't, a lot of times I think, when we don't actually try at all, right? Like we end up doing something that's perfectly exactly aligned, right? Like I had a client who got like a totally new, totally like radically different haircut like a couple days before the new moon in Leo, and we were laughing about it, and they were like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I did this thing and it felt totally spontaneous, but it was totally aligned with the cosmic energy too. And then I did kind of the same thing, and I think that sometimes we, like you were saying, we have to stop trying to force it. And, people like you, people like me, right? We're sharing all this really amazing information about how you can work with this energy and, oils to use and plants to use. But the most important piece before any of that is just like trusting your intuition and your energy and your body.
Yeah, that's 100%. I think I'm so grateful because spirituality and magic have come a long way. It really has just kind of spread into the masses. But I think that now I kind of feel like what happened is like it kind of exploded, and now we're like pulling back the pieces and reining it in a little bit and saying, okay, let's really clean this up and think through and be intentional and be thoughtful. And we are sharing all of this incredible information. And I know I'm going to shoot myself in the foot because obviously we sell all of these wonderful things, but the truth is you are your own sacred tool. You don't really need all of these things. It's wonderful to have them, but it isn't necessary. And I would even go as far as to say, is if you don't have that intuition and if you don't have that trust in yourself, those tools almost become obsolete because they're not really they're not reflecting where you are, because you're not trusting where you are yet. So you can't necessarily trust the information, or at least not to the extent to where you can do anything with it. So, it may be shooting myself in the foot, but I think it's really important to like get to know yourself and your power and what you're going through. And I'm learning how to do that too. I've been doing this for a long time. And here I am coming to this realization. And I'm like, Lorraine, you've got to really kind of walk yourself back. And I've even recently been thinking about kind of just going back through all of the basics and kind of relearning and re-educating and just starting my practice all over and building it up from where I am today. I don't know if you feel that way, but lately I've really been feeling the need to kind of like go back to the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important to remember that we can and sometimes need to go back to the basics. Like, especially when you've been practicing for a long time, you do get into some ruts, right? Like I always tell clients that it's so important to review your practice and review your rituals, like preferably like every season, but at least every year, every couple of years, because things change and you end up going through the motions and it's not actually necessarily serving you. And you think like, oh, this thing has worked for me for so long. And we just stop thinking about it, right? And in some ways, I think that can be a good thing because it becomes so natural. But we also get to a point sometimes where it's like, well, why am I even doing this, right? This isn't actually working for me. Or I don't actually care about this anymore, right? Like my beliefs or my perspective has shifted. Something that I've been going through recently in that space is I've been reading cards a lot more. Oracle cards have always been a really big part of my practice, but I always have tended to work with like one deck for a long time, pull a card every day or every couple of days from that deck. And that's still true. Like I'm still doing that, but I've found a couple of new decks, a bunch of new decks. And now I'm like, oh no, so many decks I want. But I found a few decks that I just really love and really resonate with. And so I'm kind of like in this space of allowing myself to mix it up, right? Like I was having this thought just a couple days ago. I was doing my morning ritual and I had my grimoire out and I was writing down, the card I had just pulled and stuff. And I was like, gosh, I really want to pull a card from this other deck. And I had this little moment of like, you're not supposed to do that. Like, this is the deck you use in this setting. And like, and there are reasons for that. Like I like to use the same deck for my morning rituals because I write them down in one place. So it's nice to have like really be able to see themes and patterns with the same deck, since it is Oracle. But that's not a rule. That's just a thing that I do. And I had to be like, what was that about? No, you can do whatever you want or feel called to do in your own practice.
It's funny. It's funny how we come up with these rules for ourselves, right? Like you say, it's not a rule, but like internally it feels that way, almost like someone's going to slap you on the wrist if you step outside of your comfort zone. And I really struggle with that too. I have like I'm such a stickler about like the way things look, especially. So like if I don't like something, I'll toss it out. Or like if I'm writing something and I make a mistake, for a long time I would like rip out the piece of paper and think, oh my God, it messed up my whole paper. And it's not a rule. It's really stupid. I don't even know why I started doing that, but it stuck with me for a while. So now I have to like force myself to keep going if I like scratch something out. But like you said, what purpose is that serving? It's not helping me anyway. It's not, adding, it's not even taking away. It's just kind of something that I got stuck into doing. And it sometimes it's nice to just break up the comfort zone, because growth can't occur in the comfort zone, right? It has to occur just outside of it. So being able to have those moments where we question those rules and we question, why am I doing this? Do I even enjoy doing it? I think is where the growth really begins. And to kind of loop it back around to your question, I would even add that on to what it means to live a magical life, is just being curious enough to ask yourself these questions, and being open-minded enough to consider that the answer that you've been carrying all these years may not be the answer moving forward, and being able to give yourself enough space to, try on something different.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. So with all of that kind of in mind, how do you recommend people work with a book like your new book? Like, how can they work with it in a way that is really present and intuitive?
I think whether you're working with a book or the decks or anything, I think the most important thing is, and funny enough, I was just having a conversation with my therapist about this 2 days ago. I was kind of going back and forth and trying to figure out where I wanted my practice to be. She's very spiritually minded, and her mother does like goddess work and energy, so she really knows what I'm talking about. And I can tell her about all of these things. And I was like, I'm really trying to figure out where my practice is going, and even the things that I've created, how I can use that in my practice moving forward. And she said, just focus where you have clarity, start with what you know. And I thought, God, that's just it was such a simple thing for her to say, but it rang so true for me to just start with what I know. And, sometimes you don't know what you want to accomplish. Like if you pick up my book and you think, I really want to make something, but I don't know what it is that I want to make. Well, start with something that feels familiar, or start with something that you want to work on. Like if you're in the process of grief, go to the Samhain chapter and do one of the grief recipes. Even if you don't know what you're grieving or why you're grieving so long, just, you know, if that's the space you're in, then just let yourself be in that space. And I think as you start mixing the potions, reading the story, reading about the ingredients, something will jump out that will unlock something for you. That's another really important thing that my therapist gave me the other day too. She was like, you know, we tend to think that when we do spiritual work, everything's going to be internal, right? We're going to have this big, huge aha moment that's going to come from us asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of journaling. And sometimes it's external. You might open up a book and you read something and that's exactly that missing piece that you needed. And I would encourage you to use everything that I create that way. It's just a way to kind of like direct your energy, direct your mind to where it needs to go, and just follow those little intuitive pings. And you know, if you don't know why you want to make a shampoo, for example, out of my book, don't question it, just do it and let it unfold the way it's going to unfold. And then kind of the opposite to that is obviously being intentional. And if you know, like if you take a few moments and say, okay, this is really what I want to work on right now, just go with it and just let yourself kind of go to that page, work with it, see what happens. And you can always change your mind. Like none of these things are set in stone. You can change your mind. You can change a recipe. You can start over. You can do whatever you want. But just trusting yourself to know that you already know the answer, I think is really powerful when you work with the book and when you work with the decks and anything else.
Right. Okay. So this brought up a really interesting question for me, I think. So you have this new book that's all about the Wheel of the Year, and you have these Wheel of the Year decks, right? We don't have all 8 yet, but we will. So I know I've heard you talk about this before, about people always ask you with the decks, right? Like, can I use it at other times of the year, or is it just like for this one, week of this festival? And I would love what you just said about, like, if you're feeling grief, like go to the Samhain chapter. Can you talk more about that and like how you can work with the Wheel of the Year, not just when those seasons are here?
Yes, 100%. I get this question a lot, and I love when I get this question because I think it really speaks to why so many people work with the seasons in the first place. I always, and also too, because I live in Los Angeles, right? So we don't really have the seasons here. You know what I mean? Like it's becoming fall, but fall, like September, October for Los Angeles is like, it's like 80 degrees. Like October is like the hottest month of the year. So, and people ask me all the time, well, I don't really have the seasons where I live. Like, how can I work with the Sabbats? And I'm like, well, the great thing about the Sabbats is that, yes, I know that they appear to be from an agricultural point of view and a seasonal point of view, because that's how they started, but really they just represent different cycles that we go through on an energetic and emotional level. And I always say that, whatever cycle you're in is not going to fit neatly in the Wheel of the Year. It's not going to fit neatly into a calendar. I use Samhain a lot because to me, Samhain is really representative of grief, because that's the day when all of the souls kind of transition through the veil and they are able to move on to their next life. And us here on earth, we're honoring our ancestors and kind of taking that moment to celebrate, who they are. And that is, for all intents and purposes, a moment of grief. This is where you can mourn your people and mourn your, the people that were close to you, and have that moment of just acknowledging how much they meant to you. Grief doesn't always have to be sad either. It can also be a happy time. But grief doesn't just happen on Halloween, right? Like grief is not just going to happen for you in October. If you've lost someone, you're going to have moments of grief for a while. You can also grieve, like, for example, my nephew, he just moved into his dorm room a few days ago. And I was talking with my sister-in-law yesterday because she's really going through a hard time. She's like, I miss my son. And for her, this is a moment of grief. Her son has grown up. He's no longer the boy that she's nourished all of these years. So she's grieving not having her son as a child. He's becoming adult. And I think that that's a perfect time for you to pull out a Samhain deck and to start working with those darker energies that come around that. And the same thing is true for all of them. The energies, and that's why it's really so important to have a theme, because the energies in each one of these decks, you may experience Mabon in the middle of December, or you may experience the need to focus on self-care, like really diving into your independence and solitary work, which is the theme for Seasons of the Witch in bulk, in the middle of August. You know, it doesn't really matter what time of the year the Sabbath falls in. The decks themselves represent cycles that we all experience many times over throughout a day, a week, a month, in the whole year. So you can pull these decks out at any time. I got my advanced copy for Seasons of the Witch, Mabon, Oracle in maybe January or February, and I've been using it ever since. Like Mabon has not come at all, but I love it. Was so was in my life at the time, the themes that were in the deck, that it just was comfortable for me, and that's exactly what I needed for this whole year. So you don't feel like you have to work with it in one particular space. Also, I know this is a long-winded answer, but I want to add one other thing. One thing that I've discovered this year that I really enjoy doing is immediately after Mabon is over, like the next day, I'm going to pull out my Samhain deck and work with it from like the closing of Mabon into Samhain. And then immediately the day after Samhain, I'm going to pull out my Yule deck and kind of work from that space into Yule. I think sometimes we think that the Sabbats are only just that week or that day, but really we see the energy of those Sabbats kind of gearing up in those in-between spaces, in those transitional spaces. So that's also a really good way to kind of extend the life of your deck and not just focus on one day or 1 week.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I love the idea of like, you know, because we talk so much about like, oh, they're these agricultural, you know, holidays basically. And that is how they started. And some of them can be really hard to relate to. Right. And there's the issue of your climate, like what is going on around you, literally, physically. Right. We're both in California. Like we don't, you know, there's not snowdrops coming up through the snow at Imbolc, right? Like, so, you know, there's these kind of like images that we have for each event that are not necessarily what you're actually experiencing. So I love the idea, this like reframe. I mean, I've heard so many different reframes and I've given many different reframes, right? But I like this one, that it's like each festival represents an energy and a part of a cycle that we might experience at different times. So I really love that. And I completely agree that they're not just a day or a week, right? Like they're a whole season. It's, you know, 4 or 6 weeks of each of these parts of the year, each of these parts of a season. And, you know, the solstices and equinoxes sure are a solar event, but it's not just an energy that we experience for a single day, right? Like, and I think that's so true of so many things in our spiritual practices, right? It often feels like what you were saying earlier about like, you know, all of this stuff, all of this information has come so far in the last couple of years. Like there's so much information readily available that now it's like, okay, we need to refine, and like, we don't need to do everything, right? It's like, it often feels like we're constantly missing out on something, right? It's like, oh my God, I missed this portal. Oh my God, I missed this festival. Oh my God, like I forgot about the new moon, right? And it's like every week, every day, practically, it feels like everybody on Instagram is talking about, you know, oh, this is what you need to be doing today. And that information is so valuable and it's so amazing that it's so accessible now. But I think it's also so important to really recognize that you don't have to do all of those things, and you have so much more time to do them than it seems like you do. There isn't this urgency.
Yeah, I love that especially. And as you were talking, I was thinking about like another way that's not necessarily related to the decks, but just when you talk about the Sabbats or the moons or the signs or whatever, I've been thinking of them now as portals. Like these are initiating energies. So when you move in, so like when you have a new moon in Leo, for example, this is a portal that initiates you to this energy, but that may play out over the next month, 6 months, maybe even 18 months or even a couple of years. You know, it's not like we have this contained energy that only happens on one day, and the effects of it only happens on one day, and then tomorrow, like it goes away. It doesn't really work that way. All it does is unlock something in you that you maybe need to work on or be mindful of, or, you know, change whatever it is. But it may take you some time to get to that point, and not even just to the point to where you do the work, but it may take you some time to even realize what the work is before you can even have the clarity to be able to actively do something about it. So I think that that's really important too, is like you said, not looking at these things as if, oh my God, I have to immediately do it on this day, and if I don't do it, I'm going to miss it. Well, you're not going to miss it. Number one, there will always be another moon. There will always be another new moon in Leo, but also too, like, just understand that when these days happening, we're opening up a doorway. It's not going to shut on you. You still have time to walk through it, and you still have time to make the most of it. You just have to kind of pull back that sense of urgency and give yourself some space to get there when you're going to get there. Because I mean, we can force ourselves to try and get there anyway, but I actually think when we force ourselves, we end up having to start over more, because we're trying to force something that we really weren't even supposed to be doing in the first place, and now we have to walk it back and try again. And you know, like they say, you can either what's the phrasing, the saying, I can either do it one day, or today can be day one. And you can just start your journey where you are and, you know, begin getting there when you're going to get there.
Totally. I love that. I really love that perspective, that it's like each event, each thing that comes along in the calendar, right, is not just a day. It's like the beginning of its own cycle. You know, I like talk a lot about in astrology specifically, but really, especially when we put all these different cycles together, when we bring the seasons and the moon phases and the planets all together, they really represent that, like, yes, each one of them is in some part of a cycle, but they're also all in these really complex overlapping cycles. And I just think it's really such a beautiful like metaphor for we're in all sorts of overlapping cycles too. You know, we're not just like at one static point on our, you know, like very linear journey. Like that's just not how things work. You know, we might be in a space of grief in one part of our lives, and things might be amazingly abundant in another part of our lives. Like we're in these complex, you know, overlapping circles. And I love the idea that it's like each new moon, each full moon, each festival, each whatever else, right, is like the beginning of one of those overlapping cycles.
Yeah, and that's why I think astrology is so important. I know it's very complex, but what drew me to astrology was this idea that when you look at your chart, you're really like a complex human being that's broke up into all of these little pieces, and each piece kind of goes in its own way. And I love the example when, you know, someone says, well, Jane is like this at work, but she's completely different at home. And it's like, yes, that is actually accurate. You know, we are not the same people at work as we are at home or with our parents versus with our friends and all of these different areas of our life. And it's the same way, like you said, with, you know, all of these cosmic energies, things are overlapping, and two things can be true and exist at the same time. It doesn't take away from anything else. It just means, you know, we have two parts of our being that are experiencing different things, and we're really multidimensional in that way. And I think we are more representative of the cosmos than I think sometimes we allow ourselves to imagine. You know, you can think of your internal being as like little mini galaxies in your own little personal universe. So that's what's happening. You have one galaxy at work, one galaxy at home, one galaxy with your kids, and each one of them are doing something completely different. And that's okay. You don't have to be the same person or, you know, experience your ritual space in the same way.
I love that. I think that's really just so powerful. My astrology mentor actually speaks about it in a really similar way. She calls it the inner cosmos, that it's like we stargaze by looking within and seeing, you know, all of these different patterns and cycles and placements like play out in our own lives. I think it's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been so good. Where can people find all of your good things that you've got out there?
So you can find me on Instagram. Mostly I'm getting to the TikTok thing one of these days. But you can definitely find me on Instagram at Spirit Element, and you can find me online at spiritelement.co. I do online tarot readings, and I offer my membership. So those are kind of like my things, are tarot readings and Apothecary and all of that good stuff. And yeah, you can find me at this year's summit too, because that's going to be a really fun, exciting journey. Come and, you know, get a reading, and then come back to my website and get a reading for everything else. And of course, all of my decks and books are available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all the major Booktopia, all the major booksellers. I have a few things coming out this year. I had Seasons of the Witch Mabon that just came out. Seasons of the Witch in bulk is coming out in November, and then the Witching Hour Oracle is coming out October 1st. So I have lots of goodies.
Oh my gosh, so many exciting goodies. That's so great. Cool. Okay. Well, we will link to stuff in the show notes so it's easy to find. definitely sign up for your summit ticket. It's totally free to attend. Or if you want that free 2 months in Lorraine's membership, you can get an all access pass, which is also going to get you so many other things. You're going to get instant access when you buy your pass. You're going to get instant access to my fall magical self-care email challenge. So you're going to get a series of prompts and activities and worksheets and all sorts of good stuff to check out even before the summit even starts. So definitely get signed up for that. And we'll see you guys at the summit and celebrating the equinox.